There you go.
And we just went on air again. So welcome back, Stoosians. Nice to see you. We are ready with session number 5. We have Pollyanna Pixton here, Steve Heuler, and featuring Olav Massen. So take it away, guys.
Pollyanna, it's really great that you could join us here, and that we're happy to host you virtually from Zurich. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to tell for us. And Olav, it's so great to see you again. So,
pleasure to see you again.
Looking forward to what you have to say. Pollyanna, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
Where am I?
You can just start talking, Pollyanna.
Oh, there I am. Can everybody see me? All right.
Yes.
All right. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Pollyanna Pixton. I've done a lot of work in Agile, collaborative. I built some collaborative leadership models, and I've been working in leadership for a long time. I started out with a degree in mathematics. I did some work in theoretical physics. I went to work building manganese mining system, and I went to work for building control systems in Honeywell. Somebody asked me if I'd be a team leader, and I said, don't be stupid. I said, leaders get in the way of us doing real work. So I've spent my career trying to figure out what a good leader would be and how that would work. So I'm going to talk today about what I think some ideas I've had about leadership that can help Agile and what that actually focuses on. And then I want to have a discussion with you about what you all think good leadership is or great leadership is. So I'm going to go over to my slides right now. We'll see what we have. Here we go. Agile leadership. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, I've introduced myself. If you want to get in contact with me, look up Excelinova. So what do we want from our customer? What do we want when we're building products and we're trying to work with customers? We want amazing products. We want to have delighted customers, and that means we're going to have a great profit. We always remember we got to make some money. To get amazing products and delighted customers, we use Agile because that helps us get what the customers really want, and we're getting this constant feedback from customers and constantly trying out some new ideas. To make this really work, we need highly effective and efficient teams, and that means we need leaders to be an active, enabling force in energizing teams to achieve organizational goals. Now, if you look at this definition, this does not say do anything or tell anybody to do anything. This means creating environments and helping people get where they want to be. So I use this what I call the trust and ownership model. If we have high trust, then we have low control. If we have high ownership, then we either have high ownership from the teams of the individuals or low ownership in teams and individuals. And it turns out that only leaders and business can help create an environment and a culture of trust. People can start trusting each other within their teams, but a leader really has to help create that environment to make that happen. So leaders are leader. If you have high trust and low ownership, the teams won't take ownership. Then you can have failure where no one cares. This is the biggest fear of most leaders. So what do? They start sliding down into command and control, and they start controlling more and more and more, and because the team won't take ownership. Now, if the team wants to take ownership and they have a command and control leader, then we get conflict. The team gets demotivated after a while. They get mired in bureaucracy, and they get a lot of wasted effort, and pretty soon they slip back. Now, in America right now, we're having a lot of conversations around the fact that about 80% of the people, 80% of the leaders around are command and control. Agile has been a great breakthrough to help leaders give up command and control. So what we want to get is into the high trust, high ownership area. And that's where we want to go. So, but the idea here is that you can't have trust without integrity. And what we mean by integrity is that you honestly dealing with ambiguity. And this is where Olav's work comes in, because he is definitely on this program, is that you can't know what you don't know, and you've got to honestly allow that to happen. This work centers around having options and helping people say, well, we don't know everything, but we could set up some options and travel down the pathways. Now, I may be speaking at a turn here, and I'm certainly oversimplifying his work, but it definitely helps in this area of integrity. Well, you also can't have ownership in the teams without the teams being aligned. So the team purpose must be aligned with the business goals and the customer goals. They're both. A lot of times I see in Agile, we get too focused. We can't get too focused on making the customer happy, and we forget that we also have to have business value for the company. So they go hand in hand, and we have to constantly think about both of them. So we need some great leaders. So we have to have leaders that help teams through trust, ownership, integrity, and alignment. So what kind of leadership is that? And what tools do they need? And that's what I want to talk about. I want to have the discussion around that. So, what do you all think? What kind of leadership is that? Alrighty. This is the interaction part. Can you hear me?
So the question is, what kind of leaders do we need? And I think that has to do with a sense of self, and actually it's something that we as a society do not appreciate as much. So it's really individual thinkers who have a sense for the organization, have a sense of where they want to go. Those are not the follower types, but if you look at the educational system, that's not the type of person that's accepted easily. And I think that's where part of the challenge comes from. So why do we see so few leaders? It's because of that individualism that's needed within the leadership, and being self-confident enough to pursue that path.
So how can we build that, Olav? How can that happen? How do we educate people? And if they've missed that in school, what do we need to do now? What tools can we develop to help them build that confidence and believe that an individual is something that's very important to the organization and very necessary to innovation?
Well, I don't have any clear ideas on how we can solve that. It just, first of all, we need to be aware of this issue, and just pulling children through a factory of knowledge does not work. That just creates people who know a lot of stuff, but we more or less beat the individualism out of them. So I think that
what you're talking about then is creating learning organizations.
Yes.
Real, true learning organizations.
And people understanding that there's a learning organization.
Right. So that we need to teach people not data, but how to think, how to process the data they're seeing, and to allow them to fail and to have different and new ways of viewing the data we're seeing, and that's okay.
I think you said something that sparked me was allowing people to fail, because we normally put penalties on failing, whereas if you're learning, you actually have to fail now and then so that you know where the borders are. But because we're punished for failing, we try to steer away from the failing part and only do the right things. And I think that the leaders need to, or a leadership skill is being confident enough that you know you'll fail every now and then, and that's okay.
I had a math teacher a long time ago in the educational system that realized that a lot of people would guess at the answer. So he'd say, what's 5 plus 8? And if someone said the right answer, he'd say, I don't believe you. You have to prove it to me. Even though it was the right answer. So this is a way to help people by, instead of saying, yes, that's a good idea, is if we could say, show me why that's a good idea.
Right.
And test it out. Go try it and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we have to create a safe place for people to fail. Which means that instead of putting these people with their ideas directly in front of the customer, we let them try them out maybe inside the company and use peer reviews or peer conversations to find out what's a good idea before it goes out. So it allows them to fail inside with people that want them to succeed, and then before going out and presenting them to the outside world.
So that must link back to the fear that you mentioned earlier, to build leaders and people who have the less fear. Is there a link there?
Excuse me, guys. Sorry for interrupting. We are watching the off-air signal here, and it froze. So as far as we can see, yeah, the image froze here. Okay, sorry. Sorry, it's on again. Thanks. Just continue. Okay. Sorry.
Fear, people have a big fear, and right now in our economy, people have the hugest fear, and that is to lose their job. So they're afraid to take risks. They're afraid to step out of their zone because they don't want to lose their jobs. However, if we can reassure them, if we can move past that piece and say, let's think about the product and the customers and our business. Let's look at the big picture instead of just worrying about saving our little jobs. But the fear comes from, in my opinion, Warren Bennis used to talk about this in his book, Beyond Bureaucracy, and he said, people fear three things. They fear losing their identity, losing their intellectual mastery, and losing their individualism. Now, that has nothing to do with fear of failure, but if we feel like we are contributors and we're valued and that we are individuals and we have contributions, then we can remove those fears as leaders and we can help create a more collaborative environment. And then you can help people understand that they're not going to fail. Now, most interesting thing is this fear of failure and not allowing people to fail, in my opinion, is attached these days to metrics. How do we measure people? People do what they're measured by. So are we measuring them on going faster? Are we measuring them on turning out function points? We measuring them on what? How many story points they get done in a sprint? Are these going to help us? These create fear. So what kind of measurements can we have? How can we measure, in Olav's case, learning? How can we measure that you actually learned from failure? How can we measure failure so it's acceptable? How can we do this?
By the way, we're sitting here almost alone in Zurich at the moment, and so to get more people in the conversation, we'd like to see some people tweeting answers to Stoos in Action, tweeting answers or questions to the Stoos in Action hashtag, so that we can bring this into the conversation. We'll read those answers here out.
So the question was, how? Can you repeat the question, Pollyanna?
How can we measure learning? How can we measure?
So what do you want to measure?
That's what I'm saying. You said, well, we want people to learn and be in a learning environment. So how can we measure that they're learning? Because if we measure learning, people will do it. But there's the catch. How do we do that? And then we have to think, maybe the other question is, what of our measures that we're doing today are keeping people from learning?
Well,
What
I
measures
think,
are we doing today?
so the whole fear of failing is one of them, because we want to have only the one do the things that actually get us to the goal, and if we fail at that, that will be penalized. So in general, I think most of the metrics that we have direct control of is somewhat flawed. I prefer to have metrics that would relate to the end goal that we have in mind. So if you fail, you might still achieve a step towards the end goal. Specific metrics on learning, I think that's very context sensitive. So I would look at things as how often have you tried something that didn't work? Because if you only report success, you're not learning. You're not going towards. You're not trying the utmost.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to determine what is safe to fail in that sense.
Mm-hmm. The other one you might be able to ask is measurements around risk taking. How many risks have you taken? What happened? Which ones did you test out? What did you learn from them? That's an interesting idea.
Also,
I like
how many things have you tried that didn't work? Because that needs to be a goal as well. And then there should be a margin between that. But just the fact that something is right doesn't mean you've tested it. You actually need to test it and prove it wrong.
Yeah.
So there you have to fail at something.
That's that thing what you guys call, you and Chris call break the model. One of my favorite things. Let's see if we can break the model. Let's see and that's learning. Instead of saying, okay, we'll just keep using this one. Let's see if we can break it and what we learn from that. So that's an idea too. Have sessions where we sit around and try and break the model. So let's talk about the collapse. What?
No, you just come up with a model and then try to break it and fix it again, and then come up with new examples that will break it.
Yeah. So I expect you, Olav, I'd like you to take the trust and ownership model I put up there and see if you can break it.
So where is it? Where can we find it?
I'll send you a link. High trust and high ownership gets energy and innovation. That's the key.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think about it a lot. The other trick that we're talking about is, once we remove the fear, another question I have about this is, how do we help teams take ownership? Because many of our people are afraid to do so. Right, Steve? They don't know how, or they're afraid to, because they're afraid of failure.
Yeah.
Is that right?
They're afraid. I'm working with people that are afraid to take ownership because someone's going to come beat them up with the velocity when it's a scrum team. When you're talking about KPIs, I mean, that's the big thing I've encountered this week. We're afraid to do that because our velocity will fall and we're going to get beaten up with the velocity stick.
Velocity is what I call a vanity metric. It's so
come with me
totally
next week and help me tell people that.
Just believe me, it's so totally useless. The question I ask people when they do this is very simple. How is this metric going to help us delight our customers? What? How is velocity, measuring velocity of a team, going to help us delight our customers? Zero. It's no correlation. So it's a vanity metric.
Okay, Jenny in Denmark just tweeted that it's not just fear of failure, but the overall attitudes about fear in ourselves and others.
This comes back to Olav's conversation about awareness and knowing ourselves. And
if you look at leaders, so one of the things what makes a leader stand out is generally authenticity. So that's more the general attitude towards failure and being okay with things.
Yep. A lot of times when I'm leading, I share my failure stories with people, so they know you know, I messed up in my past. That helps them. But the idea that Jenny brings up about fear in ourselves is knowing yourself. So again, I go back to Warren Bennis, who's started working on adaptive leadership in 1966. But he's an academic. He writes on trends from companies and summarizes how they work. In his book on becoming a leader, he makes 3 points. 1, you have to know yourself. 2, it's hard to do. And 3, you're the only one that can do it. So when I talk to leaders, I say, let's get clear about what you're passionate about. Let's get clear about your focus. Are you focused on purpose over a personal agenda? What is your reward system? How do you measure success within yourself? So these are the kind of questions I ask leaders. And if I can't get a real clear answer, I say, time for you to take a walk and figure them out. Because then it comes back to your thing about authenticity, Olav. Because if you don't know who you are and how you measure your own success, this can be very difficult for you to work with teams. And I remember when I first took a leadership job, I went down to my office and I sat there for 3 days waiting for someone to come along and tell me what to do. It didn't happen, so finally I said, I guess I better go figure it out. And so the key is that I have to go, I'm given an area of responsibility. And then I would go home at night and say, I didn't do anything today. I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't write any code, I didn't test anything. I didn't do anything. Then I think, wait a minute, think of all the people that worked with you that did. And that's the key. So I think what also relates to our own fears is how we measure. As a leader, we have to go from my personal success to how that success is helping other people succeed. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's interesting because one of the comments that came in from Twitter was you can't measure what we're talking about I think in the sense of a KPI, you can only feel it, which is an interesting comment in relation to what you've just said.
Mm-hmm. You can only feel it, yep.
And then they followed up by saying, yeah, someone on Twitter followed up by saying, yeah, well, how about if we consider feelings as sensory data? And I'm wondering, what you do with that sensory data, but it's an interesting line of thinking.
Yeah, I remember working with a real high. Go ahead, Olav.
So I would look for metrics that actually say something about the goal that you're walking towards. So just velocity doesn't mean anything. So what does it mean if you finish something? How can we measure it? How can we get something out that produces value? And the same would go for if we want to measure what is the leader working towards? And so what's the role of the leader? Where does he need to take the organization or the people that are working with him? And that would be a good metric. So as long as the group gets the result that the leader is responsible for, then that would be a good metric where we're going. That's as it relates to the goal. And then you can look towards the behavior that we expect from a leader. And those would be the number of experiments he runs. And as Chris Matz says, you're only a leader if you have followers. So some people need to do something with the stuff that's provided. If you cannot affect change, well, you need to try something else.
Yep. That's what is so great about Agile is you can change, not fixed. We can adapt. We can learn from what's around us and we can make changes happen. And so can people. But it's all about people. So fear is about people, leadership's about people, and leaders have to create. I think a leader's only role is to help people succeed what they're doing and help the vision stay with it. Because if they build something that's not part of the product, then they fail. So we want them We want to help them succeed by giving them the tools they need, and part of that's holding the vision in front of them. The
So
idea
isn't that
is...
the definition of a leader is something else, in the sense that the leader is someone who helps others achieve their goals?
I have an interesting conflict with that sometimes. This is the servant leadership type. There's one part in here that bothers me, and that is, what if the goals of the individual are not aligned with the goals of the business? Then what do you do? That's the key. I mean, that's part of it. That's why when we start talking about ownership, they can give all, the teams can take all the ownership they want, but if they build things that are not aligned with the business or the customer, then what does that mean? Sure, they have ownership, but if they're not, if their goal was to build something over here that they thought the customer would want, and they ignored what the business and customer really wanted, then what does that mean? But they achieved their goal. So that's an interesting phenomenon. So I think part of the leader's role is to...
No.
Go ahead.
You said if that. So what if the goal of the individuals is not aligned with that of the business? So what is a business? A business is a group of people.
Right.
But then there's some other things are going wrong in that organization when the goal of the group of the individuals is not aligned to the individuals. There's something wrong there.
Yep. Unfortunately, this keeps me very busy because there's a lot of those things that aren't working. We have this problem with too many independent agendas. And part of this comes from this really bad measurement that most companies do. Independent performance review. Independent performance individual performance reviews make people want to be independent and achieve at the expense of the person next to them. So collaboration is limited. We don't have a common goal. I have a goal to look really good so I can get a raise in my next pay. And the next time this comes around. But we need to change that measurement. If we measure it that the team worked together to achieve the goal, and every person on that team talks about how each other helped each other, if we measured that, there we go. You have something. Nobody is trying to outdo the other one. No one withholds information so they can be the hero and swoop in later to save and rescue the project and look like the hero. Because our companies are really bad. They reward these heroes.
Right.
And so people keep doing it. And it's not good for the project. Steve's shaking his head.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Karen is back with the burgers. We went for burger. She went for burgers for us in Zurich, and she's back, and she's really shaking her head because we were talking about this hero journey quite a bit.
It's good brain food.
And someone put on Twitter that, back to the question of how to break the model, someone said, okay, here's a question. If we want to break the model, how about if we stop measuring? Or I like what you've just turned it into, measure something else in this collective performance review instead of the individual. And I'm wondering if you have a specific proposal on how to start that, how to get that going, to make that turnaround. That we're moving away from the hero's journey and into the collective alignment. Would you have some proposals for starting that?
Yeah, one of the big ones is if you have an HR department where it's coming from there. Okay, if you have an HR department and they're insisting on independent performance reviews, then you have to ask yourself, why are they doing it? And figure that out. However, you don't come with a solution so much as saying, going to them with that little trust and ownership model, that little piece there, and you go to them and you say, look, we need your help. These independent performance reviews are keeping us from people taking ownership, and it's keeping us from trusting it. So we need your help to get up in this energy and innovation space where people collaborate and work with each other. So we need your help to figure out something else. Because if we go to them and say, you got to do this, what have we done? We have the ownership again. It's really simple to take ownership away from people. It's amazing how this happens. It's just a riot to see. You not believe the number of times we do it every single day. I still do it, but I try not to. So the trick is, you go to the HR department and you say, look, this is a block for us. Can you figure out some way to help us? And let them have ownership.
So building alignment and trust with HR, as a change agent, building alignment and trust with HR in a way to model how they can do it, but also, I mean, how often, I mean, it just strikes me how often we see, and even in conversations today, how often we talk about the they, like they is the management and they is the human resources department, it's us and them, and you're proposing, if I'm understanding you right, you're proposing ways to approach human resources as people who want to make the company a better place and build alignment there.
Exactly
This might be oversimplifying what you say, but I mean, we miss that so often.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, good. Wow.
They are part of the team. They are part of the company. They're supposed to be helping us succeed and get products out there and make profit. So the trick here is for us to say to them, look, this is a block. This is harming us. This is keeping us from being successful. How can you help us?
You mentioned sorry?
No, that's okay.
You mentioned the hero and the danger of the individuals being the heroes, and it just occurred to me how often we as change agents and agile coaches and whatever we are see ourselves as the hero. The hero going in. We're exactly going the wrong. We're exactly going as the hero, as the individual in the hero to bring this change in the company, rather than seeing us maybe ourselves as a collaborator, working together with the establishment and HR and management to build the trust. It just occurred to me right away that here we are talking about this hero problem, and how many times have we gone in ourselves as a hero?
The trick here is to give people, as a consultant or as a coach, in my opinion, is to give people tools so they can figure out how themselves. Instead, we go in and say, I know how, do A, B, C, and D. And that's not true. It's just like what Olav says. It's contextual. Learning is contextual. We have to help them learn. So we give them tools, options, ideas, our experiences, and we let them figure out what's going to work for them. That's it. Because once you say, go ahead.
When you get in, it's really about setting up the whole context and making sure that there's some process in place, and because most of the time you're the expert in a small piece of what could solve their problem, then you put everything in place, and then you need to step back again and actually allow the people that you're working with to learn, and basically that's where your leadership skills come in, and where you try to do as little as possible, or at least be seen as doing as little as possible, whereas you're influencing the whole organization that you work with to achieve the result that you've been hired for.
Yep, that's exactly right.
I see we have about 4 minutes left in this hangout. So maybe if there's some ideas we want to bring out, and if there's any last comments that might...
Actually, Steve, you have 6 minutes.
Sorry?
You have 6 minutes, actually, yeah.
Okay, our official time boxer is saying 6 minutes. Great.
May I add something?
Yes.
Regarding the heroic way, it's an interesting book about Sinologue, and especially for China, that in the mythology of the Western world, we have the hero who saves the system, right? Who knows what the right thing is. But in Chinese mythology, you don't have a hero. Actually, you failed as a leader if you need a hero to save the system. Because what their mythology have is much more opportunities, to see opportunities coming up, to be much more process-oriented, and to take those opportunities in order that you don't need heroes. And I think if we have this kind of attitude in consulting, then we are the ones who are looking for those opportunities so that the system doesn't need to be saved. but takes the opportunities that are along the way, which is another approach for us as consultants too, and as coaches. But I like the thought that it's also a cultural thing, whether we think about having to save a system with a hero, or if it's just looking at the situation, use all the opportunities you have, and they're always there if you look for them, and just go along with the process.
Yep. One of the great stories about this of being the hero is a manager in helping us in one of the training classes about this topic, and she said, "Oh, we've got a crisis and I have to go solve it. I have to talk to the customer." And I said, "Why are you doing that?" Well, I said, "Didn't you ask the team if they were prepared and who was going to take care of a crisis with your customer?" So we have to be careful. Again, this comes back to the idea of knowing yourself, is what's in it for you when you are the ones that's being the hero and rescuing the team and going and talking to the customer. Mm-hmm. What's our personal agenda there? Why didn't we ask the team to pick somebody to deal with the customer crisis? What happened? We wanted to do it. So it's a very difficult situation. Like I said, there are many, many, many ways we take away ownership, and that's one of them by not asking the team. So if the customer calls with a crisis, who do you want me to, who should I send them to? We have to be very careful. Make sense?
Very much.
Yeah. So as a leader, we need to make sure that our organization does not reward the hero. And that's one of the things we have to be prepared to do, is go to people and say, you can't reward them. You can't reward this woman because they withheld information and didn't help us. Caused the crisis in the organization. You have to look at your culture to see.
So is that what you're saying, Pollyanna, is that we need fairy tales where we kill the hero?
We kill the hero? I don't think you kill him. You just don't reward him.
Pollyanna, are you...
Get them out of work.
What if everyone's a hero? I mean, what if we switch the paradigm and shift it to everyone is a hero in their own way? So, just a thought.
As long as you reward collective success. So if all of them work together and everybody collaborate, they can all be heroes.
I think that's right, and I think that might be the leader's role, is to make everybody the hero.
Yep. Nobody gets to be the hero by themselves. I like that model.
That's a good one.
We should do something with it.
What are we going to do?
Good idea. Let's get online and have a discussion.
Yeah, and there's open space next, so that's a good time to work on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Leadership beyond heroism.
Yes.
Heroic leadership.
Okay, I think Pollyanna, thanks a lot for joining us. I think our time for this hangout's over.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and I can tell you here in the main studio in Copenhagen, we had a lot of laughs and discussions and comments and tweets, and you really stirred up things here, so that's good. Thanks a lot.
That's my job.
It seems to be what you do, Pollyanna, doesn't it?
Yes, it is.
So thanks a lot, Pollyanna, Steve, and Olav, and also you, Donna. For this. Perfect and great. Wonderful. As you know, we will now be closing this hangout, and there is an open space, there's a link to the open space feed, the YouTube on air feed. So in a couple of minutes we will be going live there. So thank you for watching. You can close this, go to stoosinaction.dk in the front page and follow the link on top of the page, and see you in some minutes.
Okay, great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. You were great.
You too.